So this module is about data classes in Python, and I've kind of like avoided this for quite a while, but I saw a piece of code and it used data classes a lot. And basically, I've come to the realization that they are very useful. I try to always use the colloquial, like classical approach with Python, and that's the same for classes. So one thing that I'd have, for example, is a class here, and this is like the classic class that we have, which basically has an initialization part of it, which is known as a constructor. And typically what we tend to do here is we reference the class as self, and then we've got a, which is our variable, and we do something like this, which is we set self.a equals a. So for example, and we can continue doing this, so say for example we have a and then we have b, and then a might even be of type integer, so we can type into that, and b might be of type float. And we could even have arguments that are a bit more telling, so for example weight in kilograms, that might be like 70 kilograms, and then height in meters, so that might be 1.75 meters. And then we'd have self.weight, and then equals weight. And we can see what we're going to here, and then we're going to have a self.height equals height. And this is a very, very common pattern that we tend to see in Python, and that's the constructor done. And then also we'd have something at the end, which is if we wanted to print out our class. So, and we can call this, for example, person now. So it's a class of a person, just describing what they are. We could also have a def and then a double underscore repr, which is the representation of the class. And we could return something like, with representation, could return, and I think it's something like our class name. So for example, a string, it could be an F string, and it would be person here, and then inside the F string we might have something else like our weight, so self.weight, and then another parameter of self.height. So we can do all of this, and then we could say something like as well that weight is equal to self.weight and height is equal to self.height. Now this is quite a mouthful, but nevertheless we've done it. So then we can create an instance of our class. So we could just say Alex or Adam, we'll use Adam because it's an A word, Adam equals, and then person. And then when we do the open of the brackets, we are prompted for the weight of the person. So let's just say he's 70 kilograms, and his height, say, is 1.75, like this. And then we could actually print out, oops, let's do a print Adam. So print Adam like this, and we could run our little piece of code there, and we get person, weight, and height just like that. If we were to remove the repr, you might be asking what's the purpose of this. If we did it again, we'd get this person object and then this memory address of where the person actually is. But we don't actually, that's not particularly nice looking, so we tend to construct something that looks like this or something similar to that. Now, this is all just a construction of a class, and we can see here that just to get the height and the weight is quite like a lengthy, sort of like big thing to be done. And maybe we could argue a lot of this is repetitious, if we could say, because if I pull this up here, weight here has gone down here and here, so we've just said weight 3 times. And then if we have a look at height as well, height is over here, and then we just said height here and height here. It's just become quite like lengthy and laborious. If we didn't have any methods in our initialization function, we could argue like, why did we need all of this if in our classical approach? And then also for the print statement, we needed this representation. If we didn't have this representation, we'd have all of this jargon over here, which is not that meaningful for us. So then we wanted some representation. Now, what we do have, so I can get rid of all of this now, let's remove that, is, and I just rerun this as it was, so now we've got it back in this kind of format. But again, we might even want to sort of like have brackets around this. We can see it gets even like, it gets convoluted to be like this. But we do have an alternative in Python, and it's given to us, and I might start using it a bit more. which is basically this. We can create another class, and this time we'll call it, for example, person. We'll call it person B, just for the sake of being different. And this time we won't have any initialization at all here. So like, how are we going to get about doing this? And the thing that we're going to be able to do is, and it's a little import, so from data classes, and hopefully it'll pop up. No, oh yeah, there it goes. From data classes, import data class like this. And basically, if we are to do this, then we can use the @data class, just like that, which is a decorator, and it just, as we know from decorators from other videos, and I can put a link to other videos in here, but as we know from decorators, the decorator just gives extra functionality. And the functionality that it's going to give is all of these pieces. It gives us out of the box an init and a wrapper. It also actually gives us some other useful functions, but they're the ones that we focus on. And in particular now, what we can do is we can say that weight is a integer, so we can give our type hinting nicely here, and then we can say also that our height is a float, so something like this. We've got a nice type hinting. We could also, if we wanted to, like have the keyword argument, so we could actually specify default height if we wanted to, but in our case we're not going to. And that's basically it. Now what we actually have here is we can create the same instance of a class, but this time instead of Adam we're going to have Bob, and we're going to say that Bob is also a person, but this time he's not of type person but of type person B, which is our new data class over here. And when we open up the brackets, we see we're automatically prompted for the weight and the height, as in we never had to do this init function at the top. We're automatically given that. So we could now say that Bob is 65 kilograms, so he's slightly lighter in weight, and we could say that he's 1.70 meters, so slightly shorter in height. And then we could actually print out Bob. So we could do a print of Bob. And what we see is we never had any inits, we didn't have anything. What we did have to give up was, whilst we didn't have to have our initialization or our wrapper, we did have to have this from data class import data classes, and we had to have a decorator above our class. But aside from that, it's very clean. And if we're going to do this many times, and this is kind of like where I saw the code and I thought, you know what, it's actually quite useful, because you do this import once, and then for any class that you ever create, if you're creating lots of classes that have structure in them and they don't need the init functions or the wrapper functions, that we get these built in the classical way, that this data class is nice and clean. And this thing here is very clean indeed. We could even, well, we could description of the person. And the other nice thing about it actually is when we come to do this like description of the class here, if we actually had a description in the initialization, this actually takes precedence in the docstring, so another docstring. And when we do hover over the person, we actually see the another docstring, and we might not want to see that. We might actually just want to see the description of the class here. And when we go over here, we just see description of the person. There's no other place to put an alternative docstring because the constructor is already in place. And what would that constructor look like? Well, it would exactly look like this basically. In fact, it would look identical to this in this case, which is the whole init function over here. So that's basically data classes in Python. They're a very convenient tool, and let's just run this, and we just see here we didn't have to create our wrapper function with this string that looked like this. And we can imagine if we've got more variables in here that this would be a horrendous looking build. Our our initialization would become multiple lines long, and our wrapper function would need to be constructed upon a whole bunch of things. But here it's all just done for us in this nice data class method over here, this nice data class decorator over here at the top on line number 4. So that's basically it, and we got the same output, but we got the outputs in a much cleaner format. So that's data classes in Python.